If you are a fan of music, you're going to want to listen to this. If you're a fan of wrestling, you're also going to want to listen to this. Even if you're a fan of podcasts, you're going to want to listen to this because this man, you do all three. Robbie Vegas, welcome. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for having me. That was a good introduction.
I mean, hey, you do a lot. You don't make it hard to, find stuff that you're good at.
Appreciate
So
that, man. Really do.
recently, you've had some pretty cool stuff going on. You just wrestled Dango in Johnson City, New York, which is a pretty big match already. And then I think you kind of already topped that. You're now the owner of some new hardware, it looks like.
I am. I'm the actually first ever EWF tag team champions. The Nightbreed, myself and Mad Dog, Webster, New York. We won the titles just a few days ago, actually, in two matches back to back, and I'm still incredibly sore.
I can imagine. So, how is it being the inaugural champion? You kind of set, the precedent for everything moving forward. How is that?
Well, I mean, it's a lot to carry because I want this to kick off the right way. EWF's a newer company. This was only their second show, which is why we're the first set of tag team champions that they've ever had, which is Extreme Wrestling Force. Kind of like an ECW kind of vibe. If anybody listening was around for ECW, um, it's more of a hardcore kind of 18 and up crowd, and getting the reactions that we get from those guys is incredibly meaningful. And I think that we can do a good job setting the standard. Me and Mad Dog are now 7-time tag team champions spread across 5 different companies, I believe. So yeah, it's pretty cool to be the first ones to say that we got it. Now we just have to keep carrying it.
Yes. So, when did you and Mad Dog start teaming? How long has this been a thing?
Oh, well, we teamed off and on, but I think we started regularly teaming in about 2015, maybe possibly
So,
16, but maybe here and there. And then it became like a steady thing for a few years. And then we both broke off and went our own separate ways and did some single stuff. And we were just asked to come back together for this tag team title tournament, actually.
so that's got to be pretty cool then to be, asked to come back with somebody who I'm assuming you're pretty close with and do something pretty major that early on into a company's history.
Yeah, it was unexpected. The first show we had nothing to do with each other really. So when we were asked to come back to do this, it's just like riding a bike. He's like family to me. He's been a brother
Yeah.
to me for 7, 8 years now, however long we've known each other, and we've traveled up and down the roads, and we won tag team titles in Indiana and all over New York. And it's just it's pretty surreal moment when they handed us the belts, and I looked over and it was me and him again after
Yeah.
so many years of not doing it. It just meant a lot that it was us.
Yeah, for sure. So before we get back to modern day, because we do have some new music to talk about,
We do.
but we got to get some background on, who you are. So obviously, as I said, you do a lot of things, many different things. So we're gonna go to the beginning of everything. Not necessarily which did you, start pursuing, but out of the three, music, podcasting, and wrestling, which one like caught your attention first? Do you remember?
I do. It was actually music. My uncle, when I was about 4 or 5 years old, gave me Kiss Alive on vinyl. And that was it. He gave me Kiss Alive and he gave me a Beatles vinyl. And to this day, I still love the Beatles. I still love Kiss. And that really kicked it off for me to the point where I actually started playing the guitar when I was 6 years old. And by
Wow.
the time I was 13, I was already playing, getting paid to play music. I was in bands and I was playing in clubs and bars that I had no business being in because I was 13, 14 years old. And yeah, I got into music super, super young, but wrestling wasn't far behind. I remember falling in love with wrestling like very, very shortly after.
So, at what age did you actually start pursuing wrestling? Now, I'm assuming it wasn't 6 years old. I don't think you were going to training school, but
No, wrestling, I actually got in, like started pursuing wrestling late. So I had already been in the music business for 7 or 8 years by the time I started even trying to do anything with wrestling. I was in the gym and I was lifting weights, and a guy came up to me and asked me if I had any interest in pursuing wrestling, which was really crazy. And I was like, yeah, I think about it all the time. And I was 22, maybe. And he took me to a school. I had a couple sessions, didn't like it, found a different school, and then I just hit the ground running from there with Buffalo Championship Wrestling.
so at what age were you actually first exposed to wrestling? Like, what was your first earliest memory that you remember seeing?
Oh my God. So my cousins were huge wrestling fans, and one of them is significantly older. So he had a lot of action figures and toys and things like that. And I remember getting into the toys and sitting and watching older wrestling that he had on VHS. If you don't know what a VHS is, I apologize.
I do. I can't speak for everybody, but I do.
So I remember watching like old stuff too, but at the time when I started watching, Hogan was still a thing, and Jake the Snake and Macho Man and all those guys were still around. But the guys that really grabbed me were gonna be they would come to be known as the new generation with Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart, Diesel, Razor Ramon, Undertaker. Those are the guys that really grabbed me. So I was probably around like 7 or 8 years old when I really was like, man, this is amazing, and I want to do this someday.
So is that something now, learning about the older stuff, is that kind of what you base your style off of now?
Yes and no. When I first got started, I was definitely very much about I want to wrestle like Shawn, I want to wrestle like Brett, Mr. Perfect, like guys like that. But you have to adapt. And right
Yeah.
now, that's not the exact style, but I do take elements of all of that. And then I try and make it a little more new school so that I get a little bit of everything. Because then as I got older, I did start to like the guys like Edge and Jeff Hardy and guys like that. And then a little bit older, and I'm seeing the Dolph Zigglers of the world come through. And now you got the Seth Rollins. And like, I try to incorporate a little bit of everything.
So starting both of them, I mean, like 22 still isn't that. I mean, you got guys like DDP who started in their 30s, so 22 isn't that old to start. So did you ever see any difficulty like early on, kind of juggling the two careers?
Not early on because I was actually so burned out on music when I started training for wrestling that I actually took a break from music. I had already cut a bunch of demos and did a few records, and I've been, I opened up for some awesome bands, and I was doing really well. But there was also a lot of broken promises, things falling through, deals
Yeah.
that didn't happen, and I was really feeling jaded. And then wrestling came along and kind of saved me from myself a little bit, gave me a new focus, new respect, and once I broke into wrestling, I started doing shows here and there again. And now I do both very, very regularly. But for a while there, I just mainly focused on wrestling just so I could reset my mind and get back into music properly.
Yeah, and so now to the music. This is all over the place, by the way, but I mean, you got a lot, going on. So you said your early influences are like Kiss and the Beatles. Obviously, that also seems to have changed a bit
Yeah.
now. So where did the shift kind of come from to, mostly hair metal as well as heavier things? Where did that start to come in?
High school. Well, growing up, I kind of same deal. I had older cousins who were very into hair metal, so when I would go to their house, they would be spinning their vinyls and whatnot. And I really fell in love with Poison. And from there, it just kind of kicked the door in for me, and it became like, well, what else? What else sounds like this? What else was around back then? And I say back then as if it was so long ago before I discovered it, but but what else was around in that genre, I should say. Um, and I fell in love with like Warrant and Winger, and I discovered White Lion and Striper, and then it just became like anything that was hair metal, I wanted to hear it. Dangerous Toys was a big one for me, um, and then going through high school though, that's when it really was like, okay, I had my Kiss, I had my hair metal, but then the stuff that started coming out when I was in high school was super influential because I was playing in a lot of bands that sounded like these guys. So it was
Yeah.
Godsmack, Dope, Orgy, all the new metal bands at the time that were coming out, Static X, Crazy Town, like those are the bands that we really started listening to when we were like 16, 17, 18, 19 years old because we had a similar sound to that. It was just the sound of the time. And from there, I discovered Wednesday 13 and got into some heavier stuff like Wednesday and Lacuna Coil and things like that would come later. But it started with the Murder Dolls into Wednesday, and then it just started getting heavier from there. But hair metal is always going to be my favorite thing. And like, my bedroom walls would be covered with new metal on this side and hair metal on this side. Like I'd look to my left and I'd have like Poison and Winger and Vixen and, all those bands. And then over here I had like Dope and Orgy, and it was just a mix of everything.
So now that you're writing your own stuff, like this is all done by you, are you kind of just letting all the influences go crazy and just doing whatever you want?
Yeah, kind of. On my last release, which is already out on Apple and Spotify and all
Yep.
those anywhere you can download music, it's more heavy. It's called Angels and
Yeah.
Demons, and it's very much 80s influenced. It's very much a hair metal album with maybe a little bit of a modern spin on it. This new album that's coming out though is going to be much different. There's only one song on there that I could relate to that last record. This next release is very different. There's a lot of layers, and I'm curious to see what my fan base is going to think of it because of that difference.
And so was that difference, was that like a conscious choice that you made, or was that just kind of how things fell into place, how you're feeling at the time?
Yeah, I actually planned on making a pretty hard rocking record and just having maybe a ballad or two. And it ended up being the opposite. Just a result of how I was feeling, things that I was going through and thinking about a lot. And all of a sudden I had all these layers to all these songs, and they were all good songs. And I didn't want to not use them just because I wanted a hard rocking record. So I threw my one rock track on there, maybe two. One of them's a little bit, still on the rockier side, a little bit bluesy, but the others are ballads. And it just the way it played out, but there's a lot of layers to it. So I'm pretty excited to see, um, what everybody thinks about the contrast between the two.
Yeah. So does all the other stuff have that you have going on influence at all your writing? Like if you're beat up after a long weekend of working on the road, does that influence anything that you're writing about? Just the pain that you're feeling at the moment? Does that kind of seep in ever?
It Yes and no. So it doesn't always hit lyrically, but it might musically. And
Yeah.
not to say that I won't ever write about those situations or those things, because I do like to write about everything that's going on in my life. It might not be outright for somebody to hear it and go, "Oh, that's about a weekend on the road," but to
Yeah.
me, that's what it was. But it's a yes and no kind of thing, because if I'm really dragging, it's been a long weekend, like this past weekend, and I took however many chair shots. When I pick up my guitar, maybe it's angry, or maybe I'm just so beat down and whatever. I just start playing a slow little, riff, and it could become like a beautiful ballad. And it's all just because like I was feeling drained, I was feeling beat up, and I got this beautiful melody out of it.
Yeah. So now we got to get into the third medium, which we haven't really covered much, is podcasting. You're also the host of All Bets Are Off. How did
Yes.
that start? How recently has that come about?
So I've been doing it for 3 years, and the reason I started the All Bets Are Off podcast was I love being on the road. I love meeting people. And I have a lot of friends in the music and the wrestling business who have amazing stories. And I'm a fan of hearing people's stories, where they came from, how they got started, where they're going next. And I love having those conversations. And I started thinking like, man, this is the basis of a podcast. I love to
Yeah.
talk music, love to talk wrestling. I love to talk horror movies, which I have a lot of friends involved in those. And I have the right people to make the podcast successful right off the jump because of the people that are in my inner circle. So I decided to give it a shot, and luckily it took off immediately, because I really do enjoy hearing it as much as I enjoy putting it out for everybody else. And some of the stuff I already know, but I like to get it out there, and it inspires me. When I had Bruce Kulick on for the first time from Kiss, I was thrilled to have him, and I was so excited to have him that I think it just came across that way to my listeners, and things just started picking up. Same thing with Dee Snider and Winger and all these guys. Like, I couldn't wait to hear those stories from me. So if I
Yeah.
can't wait to hear them, other people with my mindset aren't going to be able to wait to hear them either. So I just kind of took a chance, and luckily it worked out.
So now I'm curious because you do have so much going on. It's very much in the vein of like what Jericho has going on. He's doing all this stuff. What does your calendar look like? Like, what does a normal kind of week look like for you? If you can even explain that in words.
It's insane. It's insane because I'm in the gym 6 days a week,
Yeah.
5 days minimum. So I have to work that in there. I very rarely get a full 8 hours of sleep. Working out the interviews with the people that I'm going to have. So I try and do interviews like we are right now, Mondays, Wednesdays, maybe Fridays if I'm lucky. But I also am one of the head trainers at my own wrestling school. So on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays, I'm training professional wrestlers. Granted, Sundays are up in the air if I have a booking, but I'm also doing that. And then for the weekend, I got to start prepping for my shows. And sometimes I have Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Sometimes I have Saturday, Sunday. Sometimes it's Friday, Saturday. I never know what my weekend's going to look like. Sometimes it's just one day. And the music kind of has to interweave between those things. So when I'm booking music shows, I literally have to have my wrestling calendar up in front of me. And I tend to book my music gigs the night before wrestling shows, just so that I can get everything out of the way in one shot in X amount of days right in a row, because the rest of my week is prepping. It's meal prepping, it's the gym, it's practicing my music. Lately it's been recording the album, going over the mixes and masters, making edits, laying down extra background vocals. I can't fit anything else in there unless I put my music and wrestling back to back, and it gets insanely stressful. But it's working, thank God.
Yes, it somehow is working.
Yes, barely, but it's working.
That's all that matters. So, and like, and your acoustic, well, I say acoustic, but yeah, like the shows that you're doing are not like you come play for an hour. You're sometimes at restaurants for like 4 to 5 hours, you know?
Yes, yes.
So you really have to plan those out too.
Yeah, so the night before I wrestled Dango in Johnson City, which was going to be a 3-hour drive for me first thing in the morning, I had two gigs, and I
Oh my
had to
God.
play from 6 to 7 at a cancer benefit, and then immediately pack up my stuff and shoot across town and play at a bar from 8 to 11, and then
Wow.
rush home, shower, crash, wake up in the morning, pack my gear bag, and hit the road to face Dango.
That was that the most like chaotic weekend that you've ever had? Is that top it or no? Is there something? Do I dare ask if there's something worse?
Oh man, there was um there was a weekend where I'm trying to remember the loop that it was. I believe I had a gig Thursday, wrestled in Indiana on Friday, somewhere in Pennsylvania on Saturday, and then in Oshawa, Ontario, Canada on Sunday,
Oh my
and
God.
came back home very, very early Monday morning. And that was probably one of the worst loops that I could have booked for myself.
Yeah, that does not sound like very much fun at
Yeah, and
all.
it was an array of things too. It wasn't just like, the first one was a tag match. I think the next night was too, and then I think the Ontario show was a singles. I was so burned out, and I just wished that I could have tagged out at any point of that match.
And then what wasn't there one more? No, there was three. Okay.
Yeah, it
Uh,
was the
As
gig and the
okay.
three matches back to back,
Yeah.
but they were
As
just
long
scattered all over the place.
as long as one of them wasn't like a death match, that could have made it so much worse.
No, no, you'll never find me doing that. I don't fuck with light tubes.
That's you know what? That's fair. I can understand why. So
Yeah, I mean,
we're
you want tables, you want chairs, you want thumbtacks, you want stuff
that
like that. I'm
that is
down. But as soon as
plausible.
you like, let's break. Yeah.
Let's inhale all these, fumes. Yeah.
Right, right.
So let's get back to the new EP that's coming up. You did everything on that. You did guitar, bass, drums too. You did all of it.
So I did all the acoustic guitars. I shouldn't say all. I did the acoustic guitars, the electric guitars. I did bass on a couple tracks, and I did not do drums. We have a couple studio drummers that did the drums, and then my producer did lay down some extra guitars and things like that himself. And then I also did harmonies and backing vocals for myself and the lead vocals. And I believe there's one track where my producer also does some backing vocals too. At least as up to this point, that could still change. He could add more or whatever. But so I did have a little bit of help. But yes, the majority of the album is me, and it's just solo album, my songs. I wrote them all, and once they're in the studio, it just becomes add little things here and there. But yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know how much you want out there, how much you don't want out there. So I'm just gonna let you go crazy. What else do you want to say about the new music that we got coming up?
Well, we kind of touched on the important stuff for me, anyways, which is that it is very different. There's a bunch of ballads on there. It's 5 tracks. It's just an EP.
Yep.
I did not have time to do 10 songs like I wanted to,
Not
but
yet.
so yeah, not yet, not yet, but that's coming. This is called Whispers in the Dark. So I'm going to do a release of the cover of the album in mid-November, and then the album itself is actually going to drop across every single digital streaming platform out there January 1st. So it's going to be fresh after midnight. Everybody will be able to download it right then and there, and I'll kind of do a little teaser for it here and there. Maybe I'll jump on Instagram and do like snippets of the songs, just acoustic and stuff like that leading up to it. But the important thing now is, we got the album back. The distribution companies are all set up to release it, and just waiting on a couple final mix and masters. But it's Whispers in the Dark, so be on the lookout for that.
For sure. So any other bookings, acoustic shows, guests on your podcast? Anything else you got coming up that you want to get out there?
Ooh, yeah, let's see. Um, well, when is this going to air so I know what's
This will air on Wednesday.
all right. So this coming weekend, I'm actually off from wrestling, but I will be playing an acoustic show in Clarence, New York, at a place called the Lion and Eagle Pub. That's going to be from noon to 2. It's an afternoon show. It's a great little place, awesome stage. I've played there a couple times now. Bookings, as far as wrestling goes, I'll be at Excite Wrestling in Johnson City, New York. I will be at Buffalo Championship Wrestling in Lancaster, New York. I will be at Empire State Wrestling on Black Friday. What else do I have going on with wrestling? Oh, I'll be playing at the Nightcap, which is a bar restaurant, November 4th. That'll be in Lackawanna, New York. And then I got some out of town stuff coming up with wrestling that I'm not allowed to disclose the companies right now, but it's a pretty big deal.
All right. Well, looking forward to that. Thank you so much for somehow finding time to do this. It is a miracle.
Fun. Yeah, it was fun. I mean, thank you for reaching out and asking me. And, I really did enjoy it and I appreciate it very much. I heard that you reached out to somebody I know and asked if they had any questions for me, which I thought was funny.
Oh, so, well, yeah, they didn't. Saying thanks, Roxy and Britt, but whatever. They didn't even text me back. I'm glad they texted you.
Yeah, I thought that was funny. I laughed and I was like, well, do you?
See, it would seem not. Unless
right.
I check my phone now and then I have like 3 missed calls or whatever. Last thing that we were talking about was that I did reach out to some friends of ours. And none of them got back to me. They apparently got back to you, which is very nice of them. As soon as I got back to my dorm, I got a text from Britt Lightning. Very good timing. I'm gonna read this out loud. It says, ask him what he learned. So what did you learn from Britt's roundhouse kick, which already is already wrong, but sure. So what did you learn from Britt's beautiful roundhouse kick?
A bunch of things. Okay, the first one is that Britt Lightning could be wrestling's next big thing. So we're gonna get Britt down here. I'm laying it down right now. Come down to Buffalo. Come to my school. Let's work on some things for you and see what you can do in the ring. Because I was impressed. And I got to say, when she was showing me all those kicks and knees and all that stuff, she was like centimeters from me in the face. So she could have taken me out if she wanted to. And now, since then, I've actually added a kick of my own that's kind of a roundhouse kick where I have my opponent down on his knees and I throw a side kick to the side of his head and neck. And now that she just pointed out that, she showed me that, I think I might have to name that kick the Lightning Kick.
That's not a terrible idea. So does she get royalties for that? Like every time you went with that, does she get
we'll talk about
pay
it. Or we'll figure
it out. Yeah, that's an off-camera conversation. But all right, I think that's all we have, unless Roxy's just gonna randomly text me back as soon as this is done. But we should be done now. This went all right. Goodbye, everybody, again.
Oh, wait, I got to say, I posted that video on my Instagram. So if anybody wants to see Britt Lightning throwing her roundhouse kicks.
And almost killing Robby.
Yeah.
Getting very close to. All right, so go check that out. Go follow. What's your Instagram? You want to plug that quick?
Sure. It's Robby_Vegas_official. And Robby is spelled with a Y, not an IE.
No. So go follow that. See Britt Lightning doing all of her lovely wrestling and much more. Thank you again, Robby.
Yeah, thank you.